From Wish TV, this is a News 8 special honoring the victims. Mass shooting at FedEx.
If you would have spent a couple hours with her, you will never forget her. Never.
I would like them to know that he was certainly generous. He was loyal to a fault.
If she saw somebody having a bad day, she would purposely walk up and just try to make them smile just one time.
I would thank her for helping me become as strong as I am. Without her, I would not be this strong. She definitely shaped me.
Just some of the family and friends remembering the lives lost in the FedEx mass shooting. In the next hour, we're going to be honoring all 8 victims.
And we've also brought together a panel to discuss what the tragedy means to families and the community, and some advice on how to cope with loss. One community helping people to cope tonight is Greenwood.
Yeah, that's where a vigil is scheduled to begin in just about a half hour now. News 8's Demi Johnson is there live. Demi?
Hey guys, yeah, right now I have Michael Williams with me. He represents District 3 here in Greenwood, and that's an area, Michael, where a lot of people in the Sikh community live. Tell me why and how important it is for people, groups of people, to grieve together in situations like this.
You know, I think we all saw that this tragedy happened and it impacted a lot of different communities, right? It's targeted, significantly in the Sikh community, with 4 of the victims being targeted there. So it's really important, especially here in Greenwood, where we do have such a large population, to come together and represent that we are a community and we are 2 different people or one community. So it's very important that we come together, have this opportunity to heal as a city, especially with one of the victims residing here in Greenwood.
We're talking about healing right now, and that's something that we're taking a step toward tonight. But where do we go from here? What comes next?
Yeah, I think it's important, again, that we look towards the future, right? We look at bridging those gaps where there may be misunderstandings, where there's not acceptance, where judgment may be in place. How do we look at that again, not being 2 different people, but rather one community, one nation, where we move together forward and find those bridges that we can cover.
Have you seen and heard any of that within the Sikh population, within the community, with the people you talk to on a daily basis?
You know, I think here in Greenwood, the Sikh community has been a big player in a lot of the local events. When we have parades, events, you always see the Sikh community members out here participating. And I believe they are a huge part of what we do here in Greenwood. And I think our community here in Greenwood has accepted them very well. Again, my district here on the east side of Greenwood is significantly made up of a Sikh population. And again, being able to become to know them and learn their culture and more about them has allowed me even to bridge that gap, to be more accepting, more understanding, and wanting to be a part of that community and being able to have them as part of mine as well.
Thank you so much, Michael. So this vigil again kicks off in about a half hour. It lasts 2 hours until about 8:30. We'll be here throughout the night. We'll talk to some of those family members, some of those friends, and some people from the Sikh community. We'll check back in with you guys in about a half hour. For now, live in Greenwood, Demi Johnson, Wish TV, wishtv.com, and follow us on Facebook.
All right, Demi, thanks so much. The Fraternal Order of Police today blasting the prosecutor for not filing court papers that could have kept accused FedEx shooter Brandon Hull from buying more guns.
I-Team8's Richard Essex has that story.
The Indianapolis FOP president said this afternoon that IMPD did everything they were supposed to, and they gave the prosecutor all the information needed to put Brandon Hull on the red flag list, which the FOP says could have kept Hull from buying more guns. Rick Snyder, the president of the Indianapolis Fraternal Order of Police, says the Marion County prosecutor Ryan Mears dropped the ball. Police say 6 to 8 months after Brandon Hull's mother called police and surrendered a shotgun, Hull was able to legally buy 2 rifles that police say he used to murder 8 people at FedEx. Earlier this week, the Marion County prosecutor Ryan Mears said the 14 days allowed under the Indiana red flag law to prepare all the necessary paperwork isn't enough time. Snyder disagrees.
Additionally, once an officer makes a criminal arrest, probable cause must be established and supporting documentation submitted within 72 hours. That's just 3 days. Yet under the Jake Laird red flag law, the prosecutor had nearly 5 times as many days to submit a sworn affidavit provided to him by police that would allow the state to retain the firearm or firearms in question and seek the prohibition of further firearm possession.
The Marion County prosecutor said that they have filed 8 cases under the red flag law so far this year, which the police union says is a fraction of the cases IMPD has sent to that office.
Well, in our research, we show that the IMPD had submitted at least 45 referrals to his office so far in 2021. So if that is correct, it means that his office has tried to take full advantage of the red flag tool available to them only 18% of the time.
The police union is questioning what happened to the other 37 cases, including the one involving Brandon Hole. The police union defends the 14 days provided in the Indiana red flag law. They say it's there to speed up the process and to get guns out of dangerous hands a lot quicker. In Indianapolis, Richard Essex, Wish TV, wishtv.com, and follow us on Facebook.
Richard, thank you. Members of the Indiana congressional delegation honored the FedEx shooting victims with a moment of silence last night on the House floor. All 9 of the state's representatives, as well as both senators, asked Congress to remember the 8 Hoosiers we lost.
The deceased were our friends, family, and neighbors. They had hopes, Madam Speaker, dreams, and plans for the future, only to have their lives tragically cut short. And sadly, they are part of a much larger group of Hoosiers and Americans who have lost to gun violence. As our community and our state grieve, we seek to move forward, to pledge, to never forget those we lost in the shooting and any other senseless act of violence. Their legacies will live on through our efforts to save lives in the future. Hoosiers are resilient, Madam Speaker.
And as we speak, visitation is being held for Matthew Alexander. It's happening at Plainfield Christian Church until 8 p.m. Alexander is being remembered as an avid sports fan, particularly of the St. Louis Cardinals. In place of flowers, Alexander's family is asking for contributions to be made to the Matt Alexander Memorial Baseball Scholarship Fund. Those donations can be sent to Baker Funeral Home in Danville at the address on your screen there. A funeral will be held tomorrow at 11 a.m. Alexander is being remembered for his positive outlook on life. Matt was a man who loved his family and loved his friends and surrounded himself in tradition.
Matt Alexander had a way with making friends everywhere he went.
He was my beer pong partner, and we were undefeated that night.
He was part of a massive friend group that was built on tradition, whether it was yearly hockey games, fantasy leagues, or sporting events.
We always know we can go back to this date that we know we're going to hang out.
One of those traditions is a Blue Jacket hockey game. They didn't know it 2 weeks ago, but it was the last tradition that they were able to do with Matt. Another nearly decade-long tradition is coming up in just a few weeks. It will be the first time that Matt is not with his friends at IMS for the Indy 500.
He'll be there.
Yeah,
he will.
But we're going to go and do it strong for him.
Yep.
Hopefully he'll be sleeping underneath the tree with me.
Matt loved sports, specifically baseball. His favorite team, the St. Louis Cardinals. He had a competitive streak in him. He and his friends were always trying to beat each other at something.
He didn't need to do a lot of talking because there was a lot of things he was just unnecessarily good at between video games, golfing, ping pong.
More than anything, he was thoughtful, always willing to help a friend out.
He's just a good dude. Just
not a bad bone in his body.
No, always there for you.
Yeah.
If you needed him.
A drop of a hat.
Despite having every reason to be upset and angered by this loss, his friends are choosing a different route.
To live life like Matt would have done it, positivity, and with the same smile he always had on his face.
And one of the victims, also 68-year-old Jaswinder Singh, didn't have to work, but he wanted to. Days away from getting his first FedEx paycheck, he instead lost his life. Family members say that he was a kind man, known for joking around with the kids. News 8's Katira Winfrey has that story.
Some other people in my community, they told me my dad is dead.
When Garinda Baines woke up for work at 3 in the morning Friday, he saw news of the FedEx tragedy on his phone. His father, 68-year-old Jaswinder Singh, worked there, and Baines was about to head there for work too.
Asked my mom and dad is home. She said, come. So then I tried to call some other people. but nobody answered the phone.
He rushed to the scene looking for answers. Police couldn't give him any. So like dozens others, he went to an area hotel to wait for what would turn out to be devastating news.
But I still not believe it. Then I go to take the information, but they not say me nothing. And like evening around 3:45, they declare my dad is dead.
Jaswinder didn't have to work, but he wanted to. His friendly personality called him to it. Family members say the father and grandfather and husband met each person with kindness, the way we all should.
He's a very friendly guy. He walk in a park, everyone's making joke on kids and playing with everyone. He always busy with their grandson.
His death is a shock to everyone, and family members say this act of violence is hate against humanity, and all must take a stand against it if we are to honor the lives lost.
And that's what we're doing, honoring the victims. A grandmother that loved to cook.
She find a recipe online, she'll make that. Whatever she finds, she'll make it. Whatever we don't have, she'll make it, or she'll go get it.
Plus, a young lady just out of high school with big plans.
Very tough-minded individual, clearly knew what she wanted to do with her life for the most part.
You're watching Wish TV, Indiana's only statewide TV news network. From Wish TV, this is a News 8 special honoring the victims. Mass shooting at FedEx.
She was a mother, a grandmother, a friend. News 8's David Williams sat down with Amarjeet Johal's son with a heartfelt look back at her life and legacy.
Narinder Johal doesn't have to say a word. The pain is in his eyes and written on his face. His mother, 66-year-old Amarjeet Johal, is gone.
It's hard to see our life without her, man. It's very hard.
His mother worked at FedEx for about 5 years, and people liked her so much there, some called her aunt.
If you would have spent a couple hours with her, you will never forget her, man. Never.
She had a total of 5 grandchildren, and she loved them and her family with all her heart.
She was a tree and we were branches.
Born and raised in India, she moved to the U.S. in 1987. Narinder moved from California to Indiana in 2014 so she could be closer to family. Narinder bought this house they lived in because it made her happy.
She raised us, and it was our time to provide everything for her the way she did for us.
And in this house, she loved to cook.
She find a recipe online, she'll make that. Whatever she finds, she'll make it. Whatever we don't have, she'll make it, or she'll go get it, you know.
Now, they won't get to hear her laughter or see her smile.
I miss her walking around here. I miss her watching us from the balcony when we're eating breakfast. Every morning she'll get up and just look over us. We're all eating breakfast, and then she'll go prayer.
Now, her legacy lives on within her whole family.
If everybody will think like my mom, there will be no violence in the world, no hungry people in the world. Everybody will sleep full stomach. Nobody will hate no one.
19-year-old Samaria Blackwell was one of the youngest killed in that FedEx shooting. Her family and friends are leaning on their faith to get them through the loss of someone they say was such a bright young soul with so much life left to live. News 8's Sierra Hignite has her story.
Samaria Blackwell had just graduated high school last spring and had only been working at FedEx for a few months. Before her time at the shipping company, Samaria was an athlete. She played soccer and basketball.
Very tough-minded individual, clearly knew what she wanted to do with her life for the most part and went after that. And that showed also on the basketball court.
Samaria had dreams of becoming a police officer. The career path seems fitting for her, considering her commitment to protect and defend her friends and teammates at all costs.
So if somebody were to say something bad, or if somebody had a hard foul, the other team, sometimes they'd have to look down the bench and make sure she wasn't standing up, ready to walk out on the floor and do something about it.
She was fiercely loyal. Her teammates could always count on her to be there.
You know, even through her injuries, right, of basketball, she never stopped coming to basketball. She always wanted to support her friends. So even though she couldn't play necessarily, she would sit the bench or help with practice or do whatever it was.
Her coach says he would often see her lifting up others and making sure anyone she was with had a smile on their face.
Wherever there was laughter, you could assure that Samaria was someplace in the middle of that. She was kind of, again, the spark that always started the fire no matter where it was.
As they look to God for guidance in this tragedy, her friends and family are holding their memories that they have with her close.
She was, again, just a joy to be around, always brought laughter, and her impact will be felt for years and years.
And they take an oath to serve, the men and women in blue. It can leave a deep impression on young minds, so much so that they also want to become police officers. Such was the case with Samaria Blackwell. When the Avon Police Department found out that she wanted to be a police officer, they knew they had to support her.
We were just really moved to learn that the victim, Samaria Blackwell, in this incident had aspired to be a police officer. And so we kind of turned to our counterparts and tried to find a way that we could honor her commitment to want to serve others. And the exchanges of the patches is somewhat of a culture type situation that happens in law enforcement from time to time. When law enforcement officers train with other agencies, they attend trainings across state lines and county lines and city and town lines. It's very customary for these officers to exchange patches as a token of symbolism that they have worked with other agencies across the country that work to do the same job but in different communities. And so we thought this was a good opportunity to show some support to the family.
And they expect several hundred to come in from California, New York, Puerto Rico, Canada, and even Europe. After they're gathered, they will be delivered to the family in a special way.
Well, these are just some of the stories we'll bring you tonight as we honor all of the lives lost too soon. Family, friends, and the police still mourning their loss.
Also joining us tonight is Randall Taylor, Chief of Police for IMPD, Gurinder Singh Khalsa with the local Sikh community, and Ravi Kapoor, owner of America's first ever TV network dedicated to South Asian and Indian cultures.
Chief Taylor, let's start with you. We just heard Samaria Blackwell was interested in getting into law enforcement. Your thoughts when you heard that?
I just heard that recently. Sounds like she had a great future ahead of her, and I'm confident that she probably would have been one of ours had she been allowed to live that dream. But I am glad to see that surrounding departments have stepped up, and we'll of course make sure that our patch is part of that as well going forward to her family.
Chief, earlier FOP President Rick Snyder responded to statements made by Prosecutor Ryan Mears about the red flag laws. Your thoughts?
Well, obviously, from my standpoint, I would have liked to have seen if that had been carried out, if we would have got those charges, if that would have stopped this. Of course, there's no way of knowing. I heard Prosecutor Mears' press conference reference that, and you know, it's unfortunate. Obviously, we need to have some conversations to try to make sure that gap doesn't continue to exist.
The crime scene obviously was very large, Chief, and dozens of officers responded. What kind of toll does seeing something like that have on your officers? Can you speak personally?
Yeah, well, I put out a video for them here recently, just sharing my thoughts about it. In my 34 years of law enforcement, that has got to have been the most difficult event that I've had to deal with. Now, my officers, of course, were there at the crime scene, and I was there, but I wasn't in it like they were. But just trying to be with those families and hearing them, unfortunately, one after another coming in and getting the notification from the coroner's office that their loved one had indeed passed was very difficult. And I encourage them to find the help that they need, the resources. The department offers resources, but family and friends, you know, in my case, it was my wife that helped me through that. Is just very important in order to weather that storm.
Yeah, can you expand maybe a little bit about the counseling that's available for officers when a time like this happens?
Yeah, so the department has an employee assistance program which is available all the time. Our chaplain's office and victim assistance is also available to the officers, and in this particular case, we also had some people from out of state with Billy Graham Crusaders provided chaplains that came in. That was actually in conjunction with the FOP to try to help out our officers.
Chief, it has not been deemed a hate crime, so I don't want to speculate there, but there was a minority group involved here. Is it different when we're talking investigation? Is it different when you're dealing with a possible hate crime against a minority group?
It is a little bit. I think we pride ourselves in investigating all crimes to the best of our ability, but when those kind of allegations come up, it's a little different investigation. Of course, we have to be able to prove that there was a hate crime that existed. It can't just be the fact that in this case 4 of our victims were from the Sikh community, but certainly that would raise an eyebrow, and we will continue on in that path to investigate that. And if that proves to be the case, then and that's the conclusion, then we of course will share that.
Gurinder, we'll turn the conversation to you now. The Sikh community is very close-knit. How has this affected everyone beyond the initial shock?
This is very devastating for the whole community because our community has grown so fast in the last 2 decades. We were only less than 50 families in the year 2000. Now more than 20,000 individuals, in the central Indiana and across the Indiana. But it's very shocking and very heartbreaking for everybody because everybody knew each other. Like all 4 of these victims, 3 of the families, I knew them personally, and almost everybody know either directly or indirectly. So we have a hard time even to cope up with this thing because we never had this kind of situation here, especially in central Indiana. And most of the people, I just want to share one more thing too, is that majority of Sikhs, those moving in central Indiana, they are not directly coming from India to directly here. Most of them have moved in east and west coast, and then they look for better place here. And there are 3 major things for Indiana is that most of the Hoods here, they're very welcoming, very warm, and the cost of living is very less, and schools are good, and business environment is very good as compared to East and West Coast. And that is the reason we came. And also, most of the immigrants, they come here is safety, security, and dignity. Second thing is justice, and third is economic and education opportunities. And now we are so much concerned about the safety and security of of our community after this, and we are also concerned about the backlash, not only in this tragedy, but we are also very fearful about our Sikh temples across the central Indiana. We have almost 7 temples, and we are also very fearful of backlash after this, all the news that been over because we have recently after this news, a lot of people are talking against us on social media as well, and that is our other fear as well.
That's certainly understandable and sad to hear. Ravi, as the owner of America's first ever TV network dedicated to South Asian and Indian cultures, what are you hearing from the community?
Well, much like Gurinderji said, the broader Indian American community and really in India and around the world, folks are very hurt by what happened. There's no question anytime you hear of a killing, a mass shooting, which does take place frequently in America, sometimes you get desensitized to it, but it becomes very personal when it affects your direct community, especially a small minority group. Indian Americans are only about 1.5% to 2% of the population, and the Sikh community within that broader context is even smaller. So, and obviously they're very visible. So when it appears that a few members of the community were harmed in this way, it really hurts down deep. And obviously, more broadly, a lot of minorities, Asian Americans in particular, have felt marginalized in recent months because there have been a spate of hate crimes against Asian Americans, and certainly South Asians are part of that mix.
Gurinder, I'd like to go back to you and talk more about the community, because there are some people in central Indiana who would love to know more. Can you talk about your faith and the role that that has played in this situation, specifically regarding forgiveness?
Yeah, not that many people understand about the Sikhs, because Sikhism is a very misunderstood in America since 9/11. Sikhs originated in India about 550 years ago, and there are about 30 million Sikhs across the world, and then almost 1 million Sikhs living in America, and about 20,000 are in Indiana. So we are very peace-loving community, you know, and we believe in giving. And you may have seen in the past, wherever there is any tragedy, our communities come up front for you know, for food and for shelter and all kind of help whenever there is a national calamity, natural calamity, or any disaster or anything like that. So, but the only thing is, it's very misunderstood. You know, people associate us with different communities. You know, we respect every other religion and other faiths, but you know, Sikhism was originated in India, and we've been here in the U.S. over 100 years.
All right, panel, sit tight. Coming up, honoring the victims, a man who lost his life just weeks from retirement.
Kind of person. For instance, I would like to read a novel or biography, and he was reading a calculus book.
From Wish TV, this is a News 8 special honoring the victims. Mass shooting at FedEx.
And welcome back on this Thursday night. Steve Weissert was walking to the parking lot after picking up his paycheck when he was shot. Those closest to him remember the husband, father, and all-around funny guy that was taken in the blink of an eye.
Carol and Steve Weissert planned on celebrating 50 years of marriage in November. When Steve didn't come home from work on Thursday night, Carol knew something was wrong.
But not seeing him home at midnight, you know, 12:30, 1:30, I began to get nervous and worried.
But as she ran through scenarios in her head, she never imagined that her husband would be one of 8 victims killed in a mass shooting.
It still doesn't feel real. It still feels like an extended bad dream that we're going to wake up from.
Before FedEx, Steve graduated from the University of Minnesota, where he met his wife, Carol. He then went on to serve in the Air Force, followed by a decades-long career as an engineer. His work shipped him all over the world before he retired the first time. Steve was planning on retiring for the second time in just 6 weeks when he was killed.
It's just changed our whole life forever. We had plans after retirement. He was going to do some projects. We were going to take some trips, and now that's gone.
Years of memories ripped right out from under them without warning.
A perfectly good life was lost.
His family describes him as a man with a lot of quirks.
He was a studious kind of person. For instance, I would like to read a novel or biography, and he was reading a calculus book.
He also had an affinity for nicknames. He gave one to everyone and everything, even calling himself Cowboy Steve. His contagious sense of humor often triggered an unforgettable and boisterous laugh.
We did a huge amount of volunteering, which he really enjoyed. He said after retirement he was going to try to pick up his volunteering again.
Well, a candlelight vigil is underway in Greenwood to honor the victims of the mass shooting.
News 8's Demi Johnson is there live for us tonight with more. Demi?
Yeah, people are just now starting to show up here in Greenwood. I have Sandeep Singh with me. He's a member of the Sikh community. Obviously, we know there are 8 victims, but a majority of them did come from your community. First of all, how are you guys doing? How are you feeling?
The Sikh community stands in solidarity with the rest of the other 4 victims with their families that were not of the Sikh community. It was an attack on humanity. That's how we see it. We don't see it as an attack on the Sikh community, in my view. We are obviously heartbroken, devastated for all 8 families that are grieving in this process, and we stand with them.
I think something a lot of people from Indiana have learned over the last few days is that you guys are a very welcoming community. I've heard several times over the past few days that it's not just about you guys right now. Would you say that that's true? You guys are thinking about everyone.
That's the way our religion is, and that's the way that we've always done. Anyone is welcome to our gurdwaras, and we're here for the community. And yeah, you said it right. We're thinking of everyone.
Where do we go from here? How do we work toward healing?
Healing it's a tough road ahead. The Sikh community, some of us feel that they were targeted. Some of us feel ignored. Because, like you said, we're a peaceful community. We welcome all, but yet these types of violence that happened in 2012 with the mass shooting in Wisconsin, where the Sikh community was targeted specifically, and here we do feel targeted sometimes with the shooting. But going forward, we want action. We don't want these 8 victims to be just statistics. The Sikh community wants action. America needs action. So,
how can we do better as Americans who aren't familiar with your religion and your community? How can we do better?
I'm a huge believer in education. We're the 5th largest religion in the world. Yeah, no one here really knows about us. We're not. Our religion isn't taught in the school system. Some of these young kids think of us as Muslims, and after 9/11, we face that. But no matter what you are, if you're a Sikh, Muslim, Jew, Christian, it does not matter. We are all human. So they need to teach peace, stop the hate.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. Okay, like I said, this is just starting to kind of get underway. It lasts for 2 hours, so until about 8:30. We're going to talk to a lot more family members and friends, and we'll bring you much more coverage later tonight. For now, live in Greenwood, Demi Johnson, Wish TV, wishtv.com, and follow us on Facebook.
Demi, thank you. I think that was very well said. I want to bring back our panel now. Joining us now is Kimball Richardson. He's a mental health counselor with Community Health. Gurinder Singh Khalsa still with us, and Ravi Kapoor also still with us this evening.
Kimball, we'll start with you this time. We just saw a vigil taking place in Greenwood. So many different ways to grieve and process. Are vigils, I would imagine, a healthy way for a community to come together?
Absolutely. It's so important that people be around each other so that you can share the grief, that you're not alone, and that you can be around folks that you trust and who care for you. You know, just like our bodies need healing after an injury, so do our minds and our psyche, if you will. So it's important that we're gentle with ourselves, gentle with each other, and again, supportive.
Losing a loved one, very difficult, Kimball, as you very well know. What else do you tell people who are maybe suffering?
Sometimes it's hard to know. It really is hard to know what to say, especially if you've not been through something like this yourself. If you can say, I'm with you, I care about you, you're not alone. And sometimes just being next to someone, being with them, can be so profoundly important and supportive. You don't have to think of something, profound, if you will. You can just say, I care about you, and I'm here for you.
Well, recovering from a mass shooting will take time, especially for those directly impacted. News 8's medical reporter Mary Gillis talked with a father who lost his son in the Sandy Hook school shooting, and we want to listen to her.
Meet 7-year-old Daniel Barden. He loves drawing and nature, dancing and music. One cold winter morning, Daniel and his father, Mark, walked to the school bus stop. They laughed, held hands, and spoke about having pizza that night. As the bus pulled up, Mark gave Daniel a kiss on the forehead, told him he loved him, and waved goodbye. It was the last time they would ever speak. The date? December 14th, 2012, the day a gunman would open fire inside Daniel's school, Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut.
I started getting the texts and phone calls that there was a lockdown in the district. I was in motion, just kind of on autopilot, driving down to the school and arriving on this scene where there were more emergency vehicles in one place than I'd ever seen.
As the students were ushered out of the elementary school, teachers held up signs for each grade so parents could reunite with their children. Then there was a report the principal may have been shot.
Oh my God, how am I going to explain this to this very nurturing little soul, this compassionate little boy who takes care of the ants and the worms and all of his little friends. And how am I going to have that conversation with him if that is in fact the truth? And then it wasn't long after that we found out that, 6 educators had been shot to death and 20 first graders, and Daniel was one of them. And I'm sorry, but 8 years later, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it that my little Daniel is gone and he's gone forever.
I spoke with Mark about the aftermath of living through a mass shooting. There were huge gaps in his memory in the days, weeks, and even months that followed. He recalls being in a fog induced by shock and trauma. But what happens as the years pass? For Mark, he wanted to use the experience to help others. That's when he started the nonprofit gun violence prevention organization, Sandy Hook Promise.
If I can be part of that conversation and use this platform that I didn't ask for and don't want to do some good with it, then, and to honor Daniel with it, then I'm all in. And so I was ready to dive in and see what I could do, add my voice to this conversation and see if I could help and see if I could genuinely prevent this pain from visiting other families.
And that's exactly what he wants to do for those mourning here after the mass shooting at FedEx.
I also think about the folks in Indianapolis who are navigating these early, horrible, shock and trauma-filled days. And I would offer to extend my thoughts if I could, and if they feel they would have any value from talking to me, I will be here for them.
Dr. Mary Gillis, Wish TV, wishtv.com, and follow us on Facebook.
I believe it's been 8 years already. And Kimball, as we heard from those who lost loved ones in Sandy Hook and also Columbine, grieving can be a long process, and last for years, right?
It can, and sometimes it's not a linear process. In other words, you just don't get progressively better and better and better every day. Some days you're doing okay, you take a couple steps back. It's a little bit like a roller coaster, and that's to be expected. It's also expected that you can have different kinds of emotional responses. Sometimes you might be profoundly sad, sometimes a little bit confused, like it's hard to remember things, sometimes really angry. All those emotions are normal and expected. And it's also important to know that there are other support groups available for people who have lost a loved one to violence here in Indianapolis too.
Gurinder, let's talk about that and the community's outreach. How important has the community been for the Sikh community? And second part of that question, has FedEx reached out?
I don't know that much about what they reached out about FedEx, but our community is coping up with this. And I also want to mention that one of the core principles of Sikh community, Sikh faith, is that we believe in forgiving. But that's why we want to make sure, whoever done this one, that Sikh man, that guy, the person who did, the shooter, he was mentally upset, or, so our community believe in forgiving the person who did this. But in the same time, we should not forget the sacrifice of these 8 people who sacrificed their life, and we need to learn how we need to come together as a whole nation to come forward how we can protect our innocent civilians in future, and how we can have a better compassionate and lovable community, because this thing is growing very in the last 10-15 years. I've been here in this country for over 25 years, and it's going only one direction. It's growing. This kind of tragedies are growing. We need to take it serious on both fronts, how we can handle these guns and how we can take care of this mental issue. And that is what our biggest concern is.
And Ravi, I want to go to you now. Earlier we heard the need for education about the Sikh community. How does your network help with that?
Well, the Indian American community and more broadly the South Asian community is super diverse. I mean, India itself has 20+ languages. There are so many different faiths. What people don't realize about India itself is that it's harbored so many people historically. Obviously, the Sikh community is a big part of India, but There's a massive Hindu community, a massive Muslim community. There have been Zoroastrians and a Jewish community, a very large Christian community. So India is super diverse. You've got 1.3 billion people, and it is the world's largest democracy. And I see the U.S. and India are starting to really develop ties, which is tremendous to have these two democracies work together. And so what we do as a national network that very proudly partners with Wish TV, broadcasting on channel 8.4 throughout Indianapolis, is that we try to showcase the community as it stands now. The majority of us living in this country do speak English. We have a very dynamic community. Our network is headquarters in Silicon Valley, and a lot of the tech leaders are Indian Americans and South Asians. And they're in all walks of life. And so whether it's the medical field, engineering, science, you have teachers, people all across all kinds of genres are from the community. So we try to showcase what the community is today. And faith is a part of that. And certainly we have a tremendous presence of the Sikh community on our network, whether it's our yoga programming in the morning or some of our business leaders who come on and do shows talking about how to get successful living in this country, because a lot of these folks, especially the last 25 years, are first generation immigrants. And so for those of us that are second generation like myself, it's a wonderful thing to see the community influx and to grow to this degree, but there still needs a lot of education about what the community is and all the components about it.
Well, as we've said many times, just in this past 45 minutes, education is so important, so we thank you for your work. Coming up, honoring the victims, a woman her family called the protector of the household.
She was his support structure, and the family really doesn't know how to act without the pillar of the house.
And a young victim just looking forward to starting her adult life.
She was really bubbly and outgoing, and always she kind of kept everybody together.
From Wish TV, this is a News 8 special honoring the victims. Mass shooting at FedEx.
Those closest to Amarjit Sekhon say she was the quiet pillar of the family. ITMH Richard Essex learned more about her from family.
48-year-old Amarjit Sekhon had been working at FedEx to help support her family. Her husband was partially disabled. Her life was quiet, surrounded by her family and the people at her temple.
There are only a handful of pictures of 48-year-old Amarjit Sekhon. This one, black and white, was saved on the phone of her brother-in-law. Her husband, Polwinder Singh Sekhon, spoke to me through an interpreter, but his eyes told the entire story.
The family is very remorse right now in what's happened. Really, Uncle here, he basically can't even put it into words. He's just very sad about what happened with the community, and a little bit in grief of what.
KP Singh, an artist and community leader, said his community needs peace and strength, which they'll find from each other.
Keep the families that are here alert about possibilities of dangers, possibilities of protecting one another. Have a network of people that you can reach immediately, because the elderly parents at home do not speak enough English. So it is our job to create that enormous network that is critical.
Polwinder Singh Sekhon has 3 brothers and immediate family to support him during these difficult times. Amarjit was the pillar of the household. She protected her family from the pressures of everyday life. Now her family has to find a way forward without her.
So she basically was she was his support structure, and the family really doesn't know how to act without the pillar of the house. And she raised beautiful sons with the help of Uncle here, and now they don't know really kind of what's next for the family.
And only 19 years old, Carly Smith had just graduated from high school last year and was looking forward to really starting her life. We spoke to her older brother.
She was always the girl that if she saw somebody having a bad day, she would purposely walk up and just try to make them smile just one time. She was really bubbly and outgoing, and she kind of kept everybody together.
And when we spoke to him at that vigil, he was really clear about one thing.
Feeling a lot of hurt, a lot of pain for all of these people here. We all have one common thing. We're all suffering. I can't say that my pain is any worse than anybody else's because I'm not anybody else.
I want to bring back our panel now, Kimball Richardson, Gurinder Singh, Khalsa, and Ravi Kapoor for some final thoughts.
Kimball, I want to talk about a broader issue, but our reaction to the violence these days. We think back about Columbine, and the nation was just brought to its knees. And are we as a society becoming a little too numb to the violence?
I don't think so. I think it's important for us to continue to be shocked and to continue to be overwhelmed. Otherwise, we will become numb and not do anything about it. And I think understanding that it takes time to heal, that it's okay to be gentle with yourself, but know that if you're too affected by this incident and you need a little extra assistance and support, that is available with the mental health community in Indianapolis and around Indiana.
Ravi, how does the Indian community view these types of crimes?
You know, unfortunately, this is not just an isolated incident. More broadly, we've seen incidences like this all over the country. A few years ago, Srinivas Kuchibhotla was attacked sitting at a bar and grill, just an Indian American engineer in Kansas, and he was attacked and killed. In Alabama, a few years ago, there was a grandfather going out for a walk, Siddharpai Patel, and one of the neighbors there thought he looked suspicious, called the police, and one of the police officers tackled him and actually left him partially paralyzed. So these are incidents that unfortunately take place all over America because there are folks who don't necessarily identify these folks as being part of the American experience. So I think it's so important that as America diversifies, that we all come to a greater understanding of different cultures, different communities, and certainly what's happened with the Sikh community over the last week has been just horrifically terrible. As you may recall, they experienced another tragedy in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, when someone went into a Gurdwara and attacked that Gurdwara and the folks inside. So this is not, unfortunately, an isolated incident, and this is why awareness is so important.
As we wrap up our time together, I just want to give you all a chance to express your final thoughts and maybe your message to the community. Gurinder, we'll start with you.
My message to my fellow Americans is that, we need to be very optimistic, very positive moving forward, and we need to be very thankful to the law enforcement on federal, state, and local level. We need to understand one thing, and they are 24/7 working on these things. If they are if they're doing, even in spite of doing all this, still these things happen. You think that if they're not doing anything, it could be very worse. So we need to be always positive, always forgiving, and we need to always serve with love and compassion, and always believe in humanity and universal brotherhood. And that is the message of not only Sikh community, but every faith and religion teaches universal brotherhood, love, and compassion, but it can only be possible if you have an understanding. Fear is of the unknown. We need to start learning about fellow citizens who does not look like us, who does not wear like us, who does not speak like us. And the best way moving forward is we need to have my humble request is that we need to have religion studies in our curriculum, so that fear is the unknown. 15 million students pass high school. They have no clue who Sikhs are, and that's our main agenda, to have Sikh history into the public school nationwide.
Ravi, your final thoughts, 30 seconds left.
Well, obviously, I think my takeaway is we certainly want to learn about the communities around us before a tragedy like this strikes. I mean, I personally did not know the density of the Sikh community in Indianapolis before this tragedy. We know that the Indian community in Indiana is now the second largest immigrant group in the state. So as America diversifies, we have all these different cultures and communities around us, and I hope folks take a chance to explore the good.
Ravi, to cut you off, we leave you tonight once again honoring the victims.
I just pray for all the families grief for the families of those killed, grief for the employees who have lost their coworkers.
FedEx, that's what we are. We're a family, and we need all the prayers we can.
I would thank her for helping me become as strong as I am. Without her, I would not be this strong. She definitely shaped me.
I'm gonna try to be like her if I can, but I will try. So when I leave, people will remember me like my mom.
She was always the girl that if she saw somebody having a bad day, she would purposely walk up and just try to make them smile.
He's just a good dude. Just
not a bad bone in his body.
No, always there for you.
Yeah.
If you needed him.
A drop of a hat, I mean.
The family is very remorse right now in what's happened. Really, Uncle here, he basically can't even put it into words.
We had plans after retirement. He was going to do some projects. We were going to take some trips, and now that's gone.
He's going to get his first check, and he was happy. But we don't know he not gonna get check. He got bullet.
No citizen of this nation should leave for their place of work, worship, or school in the fear of losing their lives.